Happening, folks. We're just gonna discuss my weekly outlook. Monthly down to the 4 hour. Try and keep it short and sweet. Plot in areas I'm interested in from buying and selling. Kind of go from there. So monthly, we're only a week into the April, so not much to talk about. Just drop it down to weekly. Obviously this sort of mid-range resistance failed to close above last month, and in the previous month we failed to close above as well. Let me just delete that. So pushing into that area is going to be tough. Weekly, what's price doing? Last week closed above weekly support, so I like that. So the way I could draw this out from a zone perspective is, let me see, yeah, this is weekly support. I'm just going to draw this for an example. This is weekly resistance. So anytime price is up in here, we're trading within this zone, right? Easy, makes a lot of sense. So I like the fact that price closed within here, and then the following week, which was the week that's just passed, sort of respected the low, broke the high, and closed above. Now that's not to say that price then can't come all the way down here if it wants to, because it can. But from a structure perspective, I want price to close within an area and remain within an area. So looking at this on the weekly then as well, in terms of most recent, price is putting in higher highs, higher support, higher high, higher support, and now we're sort of trying to push for that continuation. Now it's also worth noting that price is trading within this resistance zone. So as much as we're trading above here, which is the weekly support, this whole area is an area of rejection. This price is pushed all the way up here and rejected. So price is then pushed previous week all the way up to here, rejected or reacted, and then of course last week pushed all the way up to here and rejected. So I'm not so much paying attention to like all these areas up here. I'm more focused on the resistance body, and if we can remain above that, because if we can remain above that and keep holding structure above, price is going to continue. So it's going to break that high, it's going to break that high, it's going to break that high, it's going to push to continue. So the way I sort of look at this is, just say for example, this is the weekly support zone that price is pushing into but rejecting. We've then formed a higher support, pushed into, and we're starting to we don't know what price is going to do. Is it going to continue, or is it going to reject again? But I like the fact that price is above the weekly support, and it's also above the weekly resistance. So price might just pop back into this area to maybe find an area to continue higher, or price then might open up bullish, come back into this area, and then find support to continue. I don't know, but that's sort of what I'm looking at. I'm sort of obviously bullish on price. You've sort of got like mid range levels in here, which could be why these are prices reacting at these areas. But if I'm just looking at zone to zone, this is the zone that price is trading in at the minute. The support, this resistance, but it's also within this previous support. And if we continue out, we're also trading within the resistance zone of this, but also within the range of this zone. So that's sort of just how I view that in a sense of zones. Very much, not really much to talk about on the weekly, other than I like the price is above the support and above the resistance. Looking at the daily then, this is really nice what I'm seeing here. I like this. We're forming higher supports. So the way I'm sort of looking at this is just price is putting in this, then change structure here, and we've sort of fucked about in here. We've pulled down and then we've launched up and we've broken this resistance, this resistance, this resistance, and we've put in a new high. Now the new high is higher than this, but it's also within this zone. So this is the thing where I just want price to remain above this. So now the price has put in this higher support. It's at an interesting area because it's below this resistance. So what I would like to see is price to be above that, because I don't want, because we're below the resistance, price could pull back in and react and start downside. So I would like to be above that daily support, which is also like this daily resistance, which is the zone that we just discussed. So I'm literally just looking at this candle right now, and it's actually bearish. Like, it's closed here and it should be bearish, but I think it's just due to like the gapping and stuff that may have happened the start of the week. But yeah, so that's sort of, yeah, well, we haven't actually closed above this, we're sort of within it, but you get the idea. That's sort of what I'm looking for. I would like to be above it. So looking at the daily, then we've formed a higher support. Daily sort of trading within this resistance and this support, and then again from last week, what we've seen was it's pretty messy. On the 4 hour for me, structure is to the downside, but I'm looking at a price like this, put in a new support lower than this one, so this could just be a deeper pullback into previous support and resistance to push lower. But it also could be where this support has formed is also at previous support, so this could be an area for price to maybe push higher or pull back into a previous level here and then find where it wants to go. So I do have a lot of zones, a lot of colors, a lot of rays and stuff on here, which some of it probably isn't even useful. So I'm just going to tidy up a few things here. But if I just go to the sort of Asian range, I just want to hide all my Asian zones. Let me just tidy up a few things. So where price is trading at the moment is within this 4 hour support and resistance, which was an important area all last week from the previous week. So I'm just going to extend this out. Just going to do the exact same here. I'll lock that. I know this support zone on the 4 hour is also a daily resistance, so I don't really need to draw another 4 hour zone. See, like when all these zones are clustered together like this, like I've got resistance zone on a support zone on a thing, it makes it very tricky to trade in these areas, because it's kind of like once you're above one level, you're then into another level, which could be a reaction zone or a reaction point for price. So, excuse me, it does get quite difficult, and it's easier to just point out the cleaner areas to get involved in and just, you know, trade like that. But when you're trading the session and like you have volume and stuff, volume is perfect to break through these. So that could be something which allows you to trade within. But main things I'm focusing on this is I already know buys make more sense above here. Why are these Asian ranges still on here? So 4R, I just get rid of everything. Let's see, where does it make sense to buy from? Right, okay. So for me, it makes sense to buy above here based on structure. This is obviously the very first point of interest for me. Where price is now, it's within this 4 hour support and resistance. So I don't want to be buying into this unless I come to my session and we're within here and there's a clear trade to maybe buy with volume, right? I can maybe get into a position and see if we can break. But what makes a lot of sense for me is, well, if price can get above this resistance, there's clean candle here, clean candle here. Yes, there is 4 hour resistance here, so I could even in essence say, like, you know what, this is a 4 hour resistance. It makes sense to buy above this, which I completely agree with. So I'm just going to measure range here to here, 20 plus pips. So let me see what that looks like on the daily. We're above daily resistance. We're also above 4 hour structure. We're also above the support and resistance, so it makes sense, right? I was just thinking, well, what if we're in this area come the session? I still do think it makes sense to potentially buy below and see if we can get through there, but I know easier buys are going to be above there. So I'm just going to I'm going to mark this. Inner buys above. I'm just going to mark it green. And then of course I'm just going to pull on last week's zones because I want to have a look and see what about this level in here and why did I maybe have that there. Buys above makes sense. That might have just been due to maybe these areas, but that's fine. I don't think I need that one. So cleaner buys above there, which is 4 hour resistance. I'll go and fire alerts on these later on as well and just have put a bit more detail into why it makes sense to buy above there. I also think it might make sense to buy above here, and the sort of thought process as well, if price can get above the 4 hour resistance and remain above, and price leaves this zone and we start to push, we could potentially buy from here. So whether price comes up to this resistance here, reacts, maybe holds support at maybe daily support of 4 hour resistance, and then pushes throughout a session, I think that might be an option as well. So I'm just going to mark that. But again, this is like, I'm just going to write more tricky for now because it's out of 4 hour resistance. I think that should be going into the alert. Okay, so 2 areas to buy. Then, of course, once we kind of get into these areas, it makes sense to buy, kind of similar to what I had there, this area. I think, 165,525. So same again. I could just duplicate that. But buys above. I'll probably just go in and turn that other alert off as well. Then of course, if I'm looking for sales, like the last week, what did last week close bullish? Can we start to leave this daily support, weekly support zone and push to the upside? I know this daily support, it's kind of like, what's interesting, it's like we have this daily support in this zone, and then as soon as we leave this zone, we're sort of trading into this zone. So I know that this trading in here might be like, oh, it's clean traffic and stuff. Price, I've got to remember that price is trading within a daily support zone, which has some form of reaction and rejection here. So this could also just react anywhere within here. So that's good to keep in the back of my mind, but ultimately looking at recent price action, what's happened most recent is more important, but it's also good to be aware of these levels. And of course, I'd prefer to buy above rather than buy into, depending on time and that sort of stuff. So I think that's more so all the areas for buying. Like selling, I'm not really much a big fan of selling at the minute. But if I come into the session we're bearish, because the thing is, we could be down here, for instance, and you're like, yeah, it makes sense to sell, but you're right at a 4-hour support. You're also at previous structure where we have fucking reacted from on Thursday to the upside. So, I could even maybe have an area down here that it makes sense again to buy from down here, because this is where buys were relevant on Thursday. I'm basically just plotting all areas where I feel like it makes sense to buy and sell from based on structure, based on what's happened in the previous week and weeks that have passed. So it makes sense to buy above here because we're leaving this 4-hour zone, which we're currently below. It makes sense to buy above here because cleaner traffic above here. It makes sense to buy above here because we're below above this structure. It makes sense to buy from here because it's 4-hour support looking left where we got cleaner buys on Thursday. Again, the sort of selling areas are going to be similar to last week as well. I feel like sales below here make sense with structure, because ultimately this whole area is what's holding price up at the minute. So if price can form structure below here, there's no reason why price can't push all the way down into this most recent structure, and you've kind of got all this clean movement here to potentially capture some of on the way down. So obviously that's structure based, that might not come in a session, and sessions will be dependent on what structure there is and what's happened in there. But I can't really plan for those because it hasn't happened, but I can clearly see structure points, which makes sense to me. So again, that's going to be cleaner areas for me to sell below. I'm just going to put it here, and then I can look into it a bit deeper. So sales below there. That's really all I'm going to put on for this week, folks. Of course, looking at watch areas, or areas I don't want to be trading at, like this is just all too much range for me. You look at this on the 1 hour, it's just really sticky price action. Like it's not fun, it's not clean movement. So you sort of want to be avoiding these areas, or maybe selling from the top or buying from the bottom based on range play. So that's sort of my weekly outlook. A little bit tough to forecast, but I would imagine that because we've formed daily supports, higher supports, we can start to push and leave this zone test into here, and then of course cleaner buys are going to become above that. We're above daily resistance, we're trending, we're in the continuation phase. Targetability is going to be up here. I'm thinking, well, if this is just a pullback and we can break this and we continue, targets are going to be up here. Obviously certain levels in here on lower time frames, but ultimately from a higher time frame outlook and a higher time frame perspective, I would be looking at this. Up into here, up into 169. Because again, this is resistance, support, price can trade into here and remain above the support, whatever it wants. Gradually, that would be target up into here. Because if I'm playing a range, this is the bottom of the range. If we can stay within this range and keep trending, looking left on a higher time frame, this is the resistance, most likely area price you potentially get to, in my opinion, trading a sort of higher time frame outlook. So, but that will have to be solely based on if price can close above 164.191 and remain within that would be sort of my targets for up there. So yeah, that's sort of my outlook there, folks.